Imperium, The Philosophy of History and Politics, Part 2, Chapter 10, Political Organisms and War. A political unit has the jus belli, the organic right to make war on the enemy it has determined. Not moral right here. This organic right is a thing independent of morality, even though also the strictest scholastic philosophers gave to political units the purely moral right to wage war. But it is in a purely political way that the word is used here. The right to make war is part of the habitus of the organism. The existence as a political unit, the determination of an enemy, the making of war, the maintenance of the inner peace, the declaration of the inner enemy, the power of life and death over the life of all subjects, these are merely different facets of politico-organic existence. They cannot be separated. They are an indivisible whole. Insofar as they can be defined at all, they can only be so in terms of each other. In the exercise of its power to make war, a state disposes of the lives of its own subjects and of those of the enemy. This bloodshed is not a life requirement of a state, but occurs merely as a part of the process of acquiring power. The state directly seeking power is not the one that brings about bloodshed and war. No politician whatever would make war against another unit if he thought it would submit to incorporation without a fight. Thus, war is always the result of resistance and not of political dynamism. War is not normative. It is existential only. In the entire panorama of the history of the high cultures, I doubt that there has been a case where the ruling stratum of a political unit ever decided that, first of all, it wanted war, and then cast about for someone upon whom to make war. It would not be political. Nor is the mere power over life and death generally, jus vitae nescis, the hallmark of a political organism. Many states in history recognize this power to be in family units. Old Rome gave it to the paterfamilias. Some states have allowed the master power over the life of the slave. Most states have permitted the victim of an imputation of dishonor to contest for the life of his vilifier. Many states have recognized the right of blood revenge among clans, although this reaches the very frontier in this matter, and is seldom found, and then only in peace. It is thus quite conclusive that politics, as such, seeks no monopoly of taking life. Politics at its highest potential, war, takes life only because resistance requires it. Politics is activity in relation to power, and there is only one way organic instinct behaves toward power. It seeks more. Metaphysically, this is the relation between the soul of the man and the soul of the high culture on the one hand, and the habitus of the beast of prey on the other hand. Although it permits subjects in certain cases, which it determines, in accordance with the law of sovereignty, to take life, the state never permits subjects to make war. If a group of subjects assume this power, a new state has arisen. If the right of blood revenge turns into clan warfare, the state must intervene, for its existence is involved. That is why, in all states engaged in serious politics, the right of blood revenge is abrogated. The right to make war, and in the process to dispose of life, is purely political. No church could possibly ask its members to die for the church. This is quite different from insisting that martyrdom is preferable to apostasy, unless it is becoming a political unit. In critical times, many churches, such as Abu Bakr's Islam, have become states, but then they are no longer churches, and they are ruled by the political way of thinking and its basic inner organic demand for more power, and no longer by the religious imperative of salvation and conversion. It would be cruel and insane to ask men to die in order that the remainder would have an unimpaired or higher standard of economic life. When war is motivated by an economic idea, the economics vanishes into the war political situation, i.e., the test of success is the political one. The method of waging war is not reviewed as to its cost. The means used always are military political. The leadership is always political, and would be so even if exclusively economists were used as the war leaders. Their thinking would indeed be curious, but it would not be economic. Politics and economics are two different directions of human thinking, and are hostile to one another. For this reason, no true politician and no true soldier would ever with full consciousness carry on or fight a war for an exclusively economic motive, no matter what grand opportunities it offered for personal distinction. Economically motivated wars like the American War of Secession, 1861 to 1865, the English Opium War, the Boer War, were of necessity presented to the participants under an untruthful propaganda. Economics lacks the strength in itself, i.e., pure economics, to rouse men to the level of action where they will risk their lives. This is because economics presupposes life, and merely seeks ways of securing, nourishing, perpetuating the life. It simply does not make sense to buy life with death. When death becomes a possibility, we are no longer in the sphere of economics. If economics wants a certain war, it can only bring it about by political means. And then also, we are no longer in the sphere of economics. Morality has often been put forward as the motivation of war, and many wars have been waged in the name of morality. This, however, does not make sense. That is, not according to any Western system of morality. For states are not within the purview of morality, which is valid only for individuals. Furthermore, the materialistic morality of the 19th century denounced war as murder. Therefore, when protagonists of this type of morality, and they continue to exist and to do so, demand a war to stop war, it is an obvious fraud. The most any one man can do about stopping murder is to refrain from murders himself. But these morality warriors have not done that. A morality war is impossible not only from the moral side, but from the war political side. War is not a norm. One cannot fight against it. War is an existential disjunction, not a system or an institution. There is no rational aim, program, for economic, moral, aesthetic, or other change. No ever so correct norm that would justify one in killing. To adopt war in politics is in fact to abandon the other things. One can retain non-political ideas privately, but if they become public, they vanish into the political. The result is politics dressed in moral clothing. Another fact emerges about politics mixed with morality. There are, first, two possible mixtures, that of the Cromwell-Torquemada type on the one hand, in which also the politician believes that he is actualizing morality by his policies, and the Lincoln-Roosevelt type, in which the morality is purely a deception. In the first case, in proportion as the politician thinks morally, his politics is faulty. Thus Cromwell refused in 1653 a Spanish alliance which would have been highly advantageous to England because he abhorred the religion of Spain. His conduct was of course nonetheless politics, for he made with France the same alliance he refused with Spain, and received considerably less from it than Spain had offered. In the second case, where it is not taken seriously, as in the case of Roosevelt, it is not morality at all, and is repulsive to honor. Thus, morality in politics makes bad politics if taken seriously, and if used cynically, it dishonors him who uses it. The question may be asked why moral vocabulary is imported into politics in this age of absolute politics. The answer is that it is done quite deliberately and politically. It is elementary that politics does not include within the idea enemy any subsidiary content of malice or hatred. Hatred is private. It occurs between antithetical persons out of their own private hostility. Even though this terminology is different from that of Hegel, the idea is identical. He spoke of the hatred of the public enemy as being undifferentiated and totally free from personality. This is no longer hatred in the primary meaning of that word. War is between states, and when the enemy state is overcome, what overcome means is a reflex of the age, and in an age of absolute politics means total incorporation of the other state. There can be no more war. Enmity ceases, and if there ever was any animosity of any kind, it must cease now, since it was directed, if it was political, against the enemy state. That state is gone. But if the population of a state has been given exclusively propaganda to the effect that the war was not political, but for moral, humanitarian, legal, scientific, and other reasons, this population will regard the end of the war as the beginning of unlimited opportunities of oppressing the population of the former enemy state. Moral propaganda thus stands forth in its nakedness. In the 20th century, it is a means of fighting a war after the war. A war not this time against the state with weapons in its hands, but against the survivors of the defeat. Herein is the true significance of a phenomenon that mystified many persons at that time. I refer to the concentration camp propaganda against Europe, which was developed to its full height after the Second World War. This propaganda was solely for the purpose of a war after the war, thus not a true war, since there was no opposing unit, but an attempt to rouse extra-European populations and extra-European armies of occupation to ever-renewed ferocity and personal hatred against the defenseless European population. Thus a moral war to end war develops in actuality into an endless war. A war for humanitarian purposes develops into a war to exterminate by starvation the population of the former state. A war against concentration camps results in bigger and more numerous concentration camps. This must be so in an age of absolute politics, for obviously moral reasons for a war are not necessary in such an age. Propaganda cannot bring more men onto the battlefield than can the spirit of the age. Therefore, he who is using the vocabulary of morality wishes to import into the struggle a viciousness that the spirit of politics alone cannot develop. Proudhon observed, "Whoever says humanity wishes to deceive." Only politics shows the real meaning of war. Economics, aesthetics, law, and the other forms of thought cannot supply its meaning, for war is politics at its highest intensity. The political meaning of a war is that it is waged against a real enemy. To be justified politically, the war must be an affirmation of the political organism, or for the saving of the organism. To expend human life in any other war is distortion of the destiny of the state and treacherous dishonorable killing of the soldiers and civilians who die in it. The decision as to who is the enemy must be made by statesmen who embody the national idea. And if it is not, the result is political distortion. In the language of politics, a just war is only that one waged against a real enemy. It is immature thinking to suggest that military men should decide in such matters. It is possible for a politician to be also a soldier, but a soldier does not become ipso facto a politician. In Rome, all statesmen generally speaking were ex-commanders, but they had gone into the field as part of their political careers. Caesar embarked late in life upon the military career. But how many professional soldiers could have gone into politics with corresponding attainment? In matters of politics, soldiers are circumstanced the same as the populace in general.